morning. Earlier this year in September, like 2 months ago, Christopher Procopia, 21-year-old, was being accused of assaulting his ex-girlfriend, facing 99 years. What saved him was a Facebook post his mom took pretty much an hour away from the crime scene that proved he wasn't there. That was earlier 2 months ago. Earlier in April, the Golden State Killer was caught, which was a guy who we identified as Joseph James D'Angelo, 72-year-old retired policeman and retired mechanic. That counts into his resume. He was caught through GEDmatch, which is basically like 23andMe. So why am I telling you all this? Because my topic, or just me in general, I want to convince you guys that your privacy is willingly being used against you. You're basically losing your privacy because you're agreeing to social media and modern technology to take it away from you without you realizing it. Mainly because some of the things we're learning nowadays is a bit different. I mean, we don't really talk in the way we used to talk in full, words. We use memes and other social media things like emojis and Bitmojis to communicate, and we don't really have time to say full words or think about what we're reading. So I just want to lay down some things that drew this to my conclusion that we're losing our privacy. First of all, in the Washington Post, that published the article of D'Angelo, the 72-year-old, pretty much stated that he was an elusive killer. A whole generation was like mystified and terrified of this man. Killed about a dozen people. I think he also raped about 45 people, if I'm not mistaken. And all this, well, thank God we have technology to catch him, but at the same time, it's like, wait up, how did they catch him? GEDmatch, which is the free database that was used, said they didn't know that the government was using their website to basically ping on potential matches, which I think is scary. Think about it. You're trying to find out who your relative is. Next thing you know, your relative or your uncle's a killer. That's scary to me. I don't want to know my uncle's a pedophile or something like that. I want to find out if I'm royalty, not, killer. I think that was scary to me, and I think that we should be concerned because, yes, you caught a killer, but at the same time, you're using my information for what? In the same post, Aaron Murphy, a law professor in, I think, Harvard University for forensic technology, to be exact, basically said, yes, even the people that are consenting to this know that the government's using this information, but they don't understand this treasure trove of information that can be used in the court of law. Basically, it's kind of like a warning sign. Like, yeah, you're using it to find this one guy, but the next day it could be used towards you. It could be like, oh, well, you're actually the guy we're looking for, or the Department of Agencies that caught this guy could just be like, oh, we just did an error and we caught the nephew of the killer, not the actual killer. You got to think about that. We're human after all. These are technologies. It's not an exact science. I mean, it's a forensic science at best. But that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing is social media platforms. Going back to Procopia, 21-year-old that got saved by social media, that's pretty damn lucky, I think, facing 99 years and getting released because of a Facebook post. I thought that was cool. But another thing to keep in mind is, well, what happens when that's used against you? You gotta remember that Facebook and MySpace have been around for a while. You've grown, but your posts haven't. I mean, James Gunn is a good example. What happened to him? He lost his job over a post. And you would think that's private, only a few people saw it, but remember, one of you guys could be famous, and that one private post eventually becomes viral. And what do? You lose your privacy. You lose what you thought was only like a dumb choice at best, becomes a career loss. And that brings me to another thing: understanding what privacy is and the pretense of the law. We don't know what it is because we just agree to it. We're like, it's a common knowledge. Even I myself say, well, I'm going on social media. Of course, I'm gonna agree to the government or whoever spying on me. But we don't know what it's being used for, or at least we just don't comprehend it anymore. In this forensic article by Michael Bromby, he did an experiment where he studied 797 jurors in a simulated, basically, trial, gave them all the same directions, didn't deviate from anything. Only 70% out of the 797 understood what the heck this guy was talking about. 50% were like, I don't know what you're saying. And I understand I'd be under the 50% because I've been a juror. And the same article said 68% in normal jurors and normal trials look up the information before going into the court to be a juror. So basically, you're getting biased jurors, meaning if you're the one that's being convicted for a crime, that's going against you. And 81% were used in high cases. So like a good instance would be the Casey Anthony case in 2008. I don't know if you guys, I don't know how old you guys, I know I remember it as a kid. Basically, this person was exonerated, but most of the public and social media said, no, this person's guilty of drowning her daughter or killing her daughter in general. But basically, this wasn't the case. Jurors, the actual jury said, no, we find this person not guilty, but because of different other people saw it on the internet and saw what the social media was saying about this family, she was guilty just by default. So another thing to keep in mind is back to the case Anthony, I read an article by Nicholas Battaglia, which stated that basically we don't know what the law system is, we just know what Judge Judy is. So basically, our viewpoints of criminal justice is done by the social media aspects, not by freaking the system itself. Another thing to keep in mind is that in general, like, you're losing your privacy through social media, and again, it's scary, and to think about that in general, I think it's frightening, but yeah, that's basically the message. Thank you guys.
So Trey, some thoughts?
I think your speech was really good. You know what you wanted to talk about and everything. Like, you did your research. You had like 2 nervous like ticks though. Like, you kept playing with your sleeve and then you started playing with your pen. But then you realized like in the middle of playing with the pen, that's why you put it back. But I mean, it was like quick, so it wasn't something that was super like, oh wow, he really did that kind of thing. But yeah, I think for me, like, the most confusing part was listening to the percentages, because I didn't know like what percentage was correlated to what. So I think if you could have like specified this percentage means this percentage is that would have been a lot better. But like, it was pretty easy to follow as far as like understanding what the purpose of the percentages was, just to strengthen your argument. So I thought it was pretty good.
Well, I like the 2 examples that you have at the beginning. They seem to be going in slightly different directions. The issue of privacy is, I think, identified as your subject, and you tell us kind of that there are things that we need to be aware of. I still think that you're a little unclear as to what it is that you are worried about. When you use the example of the Golden State Killer, for instance, and you say, oh, I don't want to find out my uncle's a pedophile. I understand that you don't want to find that out, but I think the police would be happy to find that out. I think that somebody who is abused would be happy to make sure that that person got punished. And your reticence about that, I think, is a little bit hard to put into context. I think the other argument, though, is I think there's a good argument to be made that says that because information gets used on social media and our privacy is sometimes violated that way, that we could be misrepresented, misunderstood. There could be some negative consequence to us down the road in terms of our career, for example. That I think is a little bit closer to the direction that you want to be going in. I think we talked about this a little bit the other day. I think you've got 2 or 3 interesting ideas, but they don't necessarily all fit together, and sometimes they seem to be going kind of in contradictory directions. I think you need a stronger organizational structure and a clearer set of goals as to why you're talking about each of these points. There was one point where you mentioned memes and emojis, and I'm trying to figure out, and what has this got to do with the privacy issue? It wasn't clear to me. There's a place where you were talking about what the jury understands and what they don't understand, and I was confused as to how that is being applied to the issue of privacy. That was unclear. The idea about well, you mentioned Casey Anthony as an example, and the jury exonerates this woman, and but the rest of the world believes that she's guilty. Is that because her privacy was invaded, or is it because the social media distorted the information? Kind of how it connects to the privacy issue was also not clear. I think your exit is also underwhelming. I mean, you basically just come up to, it's at least not the Porky Pig exit, but it is, well, that's my speech, and that's not particularly dramatic or memorable. I think you deliver the speech pretty effectively. I didn't notice the thing with the pen. I did notice that there's a little bit of movement with your feet. You're doing that. You look engaged, but sometimes it looks like it's just a little anxiety that's coming out there. I think you look sharp up there with the tie, by the way. Nothing wrong with dolling yourself up and trying to give a good impression. And you've got very good posture while you're speaking to us. And like I said, you generally look at us. So even sometimes when I'm not sure what it is you're saying, I still get the feeling that you are very authoritative while you're saying it, and it comes across effectively as a consequence. All right, thank you.